I was just thinking, listening to the first reading and thinking about what was said to the young people about the astronauts. And of course, there are people that say, that stuff never happened. That never happened. And of course, I don't mind if people are cynical. I always say there's three kinds of people in the world. Some people say there are glass half full and glass half empty. But in my life, and some of you know I was in politics before I was a priest, so certainly in political life, there's glass half full, there's glass half empty, and there's this group that's glass half empty, and I'm pretty sure you spit in it. It's a special level of cynicism. But for those that don't believe, just from a cynical level, the number of people that would have to be in on the joke if that didn't happen, it's just astronomical. And there's a line from a TV show that I thought always made this point. That it's at the end of the series, and there's this great secret, and they tell this guy the great secret, and he says, wait, how many people know this? And they said, including you? 7. He goes, well, then it's not a secret, it's just information. If 7 people know something, it's not a secret, right? And the same can be said for resurrection. For the cynics that say, that never happened, you people, 2,000 years later, you're wasting your time, it never happened. And I would say, just from the cynical level, why would people lay down their lives for what would amount to be a pub joke? Oh, that guy, yeah, he rose from the dead. Oh, yeah, You'd lay your life down for that? No, you wouldn't, right? At some point, you'd call the bluff of the joke, if that's how you were living your life. But instead, what we have is the witness of people that experienced, as it says in the gospel of the disciple whom Jesus loved. He believed. He saw and he believed. And of course, they had experiences of him in his resurrected form. That wasn't even really, I think, the focal point for me, homiletically speaking, but I just felt it was important to remind ourselves who we are, whose we are, and what we're trying to accomplish here as followers of Jesus. But I was thinking about the empty tomb image in and of itself. And I was thinking how most of us have a place in our house. It could be a closet, a room, or a drawer, or maybe it's an old coffee can in the garage. But that's where we put things that we don't really know where they go anymore. I call mine the bedroom, like it's just full of garbage. And my desk, and pretty much any place I live. I've just got collections of things that I'm going to deal with later. I'm sure I'm the only one that has this, but it's nothing dramatic. It's just where things go, that we put them there and we don't know where they go anymore. Every once in a while we open it, we look at it, we look around, and then we close it again. And I think a lot of us have these things in our lives too, because we go back to old wounds or fears in our lives, or patterns within our lives, coping mechanisms within our lives, not because they give life, brothers and sisters, but because they're familiar. We go back to them because they're familiar. At least we know what to expect there. And that's where the gospel comes in. Easter begins in a place like that. They go expecting something, but the tomb is empty. And the strange thing is, they don't leave right away. They don't leave. They're standing in a place that no longer holds what they're looking for. Sound familiar for us? And if we're honest, we do that same thing. We go back. We revisit what doesn't give us life. And then we try to cover over that emptiness that's within us. And we can do that a whole bunch of ways. We can distract ourselves with all kinds of things in our life. We're very good at distraction. Amen? We're very good at it. Or we can find ways around it. But the thing is, anything that we do is just an effort to let God not meet us there. To not meet us there. Because as long as we stay there, we're still in control. If we leave those spaces, we will no longer be in control. At least in the empty tomb, we know how to manage it. We know what to expect there. But walking away into something new, that's where we lose control. And that's what makes Easter difficult for us, I would submit to you. That's what makes Easter difficult. Because the image of Christ, especially on the cross, but not exclusively on the cross, is not control. The image of Christ is surrender. Trusting the Father when nothing makes sense. When he's literally in the garden saying, if there's some other way to do this, let's talk about it right now. But not my will, but your will be done. But if there's a way for this cup of suffering to pass me, let's talk about it. That's a very real human response to a situation. But what he models for us is trusting the Father even when nothing makes sense. And that's the opposite how most of us are trying to live. We're trying to keep the control. I understand it. I get it. And yet that surrender is exactly where resurrection begins. Easter's not about Jesus, just about him rising from the dead. It's really about God entering the places and spaces in our lives that we thought was the end. We thought that it was dead. And God's standing there going, let me open that up for you. But there's that fear in us that says, oh, what's that going to mean? What's that going to look like? And hence the tension. I couldn't help but think I was singing it out in the hallway there coming into here, because it's that longing kind of song, right? I have climbed highest mountains, I have run to the sea, but I still haven't found. No, it's in C. What I'm looking for. Right? It's a song of longing. And we have those songs in our hymns too. But it's that space that says, I'm looking everywhere. I'm using every distraction I can think of, high and low. And the reality is, it's not found out there. It's found in here. And it's found in letting go and trusting a God that loved us into existence. That, as we said to the little ones, I don't care where you go in the universe. God's love is right there with you. So maybe the question this Easter is not, do you believe in the resurrection? Maybe that's not the question. Maybe it's, where are you still standing at a tomb that God's already emptied? For some of us, it's a fear we keep returning to, a fear about the future. Maybe it's about our health. Maybe it's about someone we love, and we just keep going back there. For some, it's a relationship, something that isn't giving life anymore, but we don't know who we are without that relationship. For others, it's an identity we've held on to for a long time. It's a way of seeing ourselves. That God may be trying to raise us out of that identity. Or maybe it's just a story we keep telling about our past, about what we think is possible, or about what we think is not possible because of our past, about who we think we are. And God standing there, stomping his foot to make sure you see that the tomb is empty. And the truth is, in those tombs, there's no life anymore. And maybe the grace of this Eucharist is this, that we spend our lives learning to walk away from empty tombs. That was my whole homily here a few years ago. May you spend your whole life walking away from empty tombs. But we don't do that on our own, do we? We can't. Left to ourselves, we go back to what we can control. That's our human nature. And God's calling us to something else. Jesus didn't just teach us to not fear death anymore. He taught us how to live in a way that would testify to it, just as I said at the beginning. What are we witnessing to? And that's why we're here. Not to visit a memory, but to receive the one who surrendered. In this Eucharist, we're not just receiving Christ's presence, we're receiving the way he lived in the way he's calling us to live, which is a life poured out, which is a life entrusted. In that exchange, every time you and I come forward, we place into our hands the very thing we've been trying to control. We place into his hands, We place into his hands all those things we're trying to control. Our fears, our wounds, our patterns, our stories, all of that. We say, Lord, take this. And he takes it. And then in return, he places himself into our hands. He says, take this, all of you, and eat of it. I preached here for Holy Thursday. And the psalm, if you were a part of it, maybe you noticed that the psalm actually did something it's not supposed to do. The psalm comes from the Psalms, right? But the psalm response on Holy Thursday includes the cup of Christ. How does Jesus show up in the psalm? Well, he shows up because what that Psalm 116 is talking about, the cup of salvation, is the blood of Christ, the fulfillment of it. And so it's no longer just an image. It's in our hands. It's in our hands, which means this is no longer just something we believe, it's something we're invited to live. We don't need an intellectual assent to these things. We have to live these things. And that's a life that's not held tightly, but given. A life that's not controlled, but entrusted. And when we live that way, people take notice, because it's not how the world lives. The world lives white-knuckled, grasping onto the thing. And we, as people that are followers, live something very different. That's what the resurrection is. We don't have to fix ourselves. We can't. We're not going to try to earn our salvation. We won't. We just have to be willing to let go. The tomb is empty. Let's spend the rest of our lives walking away from empty tombs and following Jesus into a new life. May God be praised.